I might be a little late to the party, but I have to give my opinion. Lots of people have agreed with me on this, and now that moment has finally come. Although the ending is rather tragic. All Western forces have finally left Afghanistan fully, but the Taliban have taken over once again. Now, everyone knows that. But what isn't talked about very much is what this has accomplished. The war started in 2001 when coalition forces went after the then ruling party, the Taliban. Now, 20 years later, the Taliban have seized power once again. I think it's safe to say that this conflict was lost. Hell, I'm Canadian, and my country has a reputation for being the only nation in history to have never lost a war. Because of this shithead, that reputation is gone. Not only him, but two other dickheads now share that blame because they didn't follow through with that. Instead, the US and its allies were bogged down in the longest war in US history by far. What makes it worse is that most of this action was completely unnecessary. Why is that, you ask? Well, let's analyze. I've talked about the Iraq War and how the US should have never gone in. You can check those videos. I made a video on that too. Now, I'm not going to go into debate on whether or not we shouldn't or should have gone into Afghanistan. The war started as a result of the attack on 9/11, and coalition forces went after the people responsible. The Taliban government harbored Osama bin Laden and supported him. It's easy to put two and two together here. But let's see how this played out and how it should have played out. In October 2001, the US and a coalition of other nations invaded Afghanistan. Together with the Northern Alliance, coalition forces bombed key areas of the country, while ground forces snuffed out the remaining resistance. This was done rather quickly. Less than 100 coalition troops died during the initial invasion phase, but they toppled the Taliban government. It ended in December 2001 when the Taliban government finally fled and started an insurgency against the new US-friendly Afghan government.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations, and to attack the military capability of the
But this is not where it ended. After the initial invasion phase, the war became reminiscent of the Iraq War. After the invasion, coalition forces set up a new government in Kabul and assisted with an operation that is called Operation Enduring Freedom, and it was led by ISAF, the International Security Assistance Force. This lasted until 2015. By then, many coalition nations had fully withdrawn their troops from Afghanistan and ended combat operations. That is when Operation Freedom Sentinel came into play, where the bulk of the fighting had been left to the government in Kabul and the Afghan National Army. The remaining ISAF forces provided a support and training role. The withdrawal continued until it ended in 2001 when the last coalition troops withdrew and the Afghan National Army lost to the Taliban. This has been the longest war in US history, while over 71,000 Afghans and over 2,000 coalition troops had died. The war also cost the US over $2 trillion, more than the wealth of the US's top 30 billionaires put together. What makes it worse is that all of this accomplished nothing.
What have you done, Derek? Nothing! You've done nothing!
Yes, the US did get revenge on 9/11 and kill Osama bin Laden, but it gained ambitions beyond that. Why did the US stay longer than expected? That's because they had the idea of turning Afghanistan into a Western-style Islamic haven. Many people saw this as World War II, where 9/11 was Pearl Harbor and the fight against the Taliban was like the war against Japan. And look at what it is right now. Except that's not what happened. This would be as if the US fought Japan until 1961 and it continued to be a fascist empire. But I'm going to sound controversial right now. Afghanistan is a shithole. Its only exports are poppy and weed, while its people are a bunch of impoverished peasants who live off the land any way they can and have a culture very different to ours. It always has been, and it always will be, an impoverished shithole. Now that we've tackled what happened and what went wrong, let's see what should have happened. The war in Afghanistan was about retaliating for 9/11, and that's what it should have stuck to. The war should have been just the initial invasion phase between October and December 2001. The people responsible for supporting an attack on U.S. soil would be overthrown. There are some countries that supported the attack on 9/11 that should have been included in this war, but let's just stick to Afghanistan. We should have just bombed them and left. Afghanistan would be a lawless land with Islamic extremist groups battling each other for control like they have been throughout history. They'd be too busy fighting each other to do anything to us, and we could further solidify that by banning immigration from that part of the world. The Afghan national government and its national army that was friendly to the US is kind of ineffective and would have never been able to hold out on its own. Once that war is over, the main goal should have been just to find Osama bin Laden.
Where was the last time you saw Bin Laden? Where was the last time you saw Bin Laden, huh?
He was caught in Pakistan in 2011, 10 years ago, and that should have put the lid on our endeavors in the Middle East. The war in Afghanistan cost over $2 trillion. The only war that has been more expensive for the US is World War II. So much of that money could have gone to funding the US's serious problems, such as its infrastructure, healthcare, homelessness, fighting climate change, and much more. Not bombing a shithole in the Middle East. I think it's enough to say that the war in Afghanistan was not like World War II. It was a lot like Vietnam in many ways. From the fact that they went against an asymmetric enemy, to the government confidently saying that victory was just around the corner, to the evacuations at the end. And if you compare the footage between the evacuations at the end of the Vietnam War to the evacuations right now, they look very similar, don't they? The US and its allies have new enemies right now, Russia and China. That's who we should be preparing against, not some crap hole in the Middle East.